All right, so a few things here. I wanted to remind you, make sure you get that Fruit of the Spirit evaluation completed for this week. I've moved your next quiz to next week since that's when we're going to be finishing up topic 6. We aren't going to have class next Thursday because, you know, it's Thanksgiving. So what I'll be doing is I'll be doing a Zoom session along with the live session on Tuesday. You don't have to attend, but it'll be there for you. So just so you know. But you aren't allowed to come to class on Tuesday. Their school is very clear on that. And I opened up your 3-day diet analysis project, so I wanted to go over that here real quick. So this is, you know, worth 12.5% of your grade, so kind of important. Here is the breakdown of the rubric, and this is all in the files here. There's 3 things you have to turn in. You're gonna have to turn in your combination report that you'll get from MindTap, your eating journal, and then your actual diet analysis worksheet. If you don't include all 3 of these things, you get an automatic 0. And this is an across the board, like all the sections of 319 do this. So I have unfortunately had to give students 0s on this because they didn't do it or didn't include it. Now, what you're actually going to do is you are going to record 3 days, like 3 total days of your food intake. And this is, well, food and drink. So everything you do, you are going to record it. You're going to record that in MindTap. What you do is you'll go to your MindTap page. On the sidebar here, scroll to the bottom until you see the apple. So Diet and Wellness Plus, click on that. It'll make you make a profile and whatnot if you haven't already. All right, and what you're gonna do is you're gonna go to the top here and you go to track diet. Obviously you select your date. You will search in whatever you're eating. And then it will give you all these choices for whatever it is you have consumed. Click on whatever one is most appropriate and then just fill in whatever it is that best fits the description for you there, and it gives you all the information you need. Make sure you distinguish which meal you're having. You should consider your snacks anytime in between meals. So even if you have multiple snacks throughout the day, like let's say that you're eating lunch at noon, and then you have a snack at 1, 3, 5, and dinner at 7. All of those snacks would go into your afternoon snacks because it comes before dinner. Does that make sense? Again, you need to do 3 days. They don't have to be consecutive days. You do need to make sure you have 1 weekday and 1 weekend day in there. So you need at least 1 Monday to Friday and at least 1 Saturday or Sunday. When you're done with that, you'll go to the report section. Under reports, you go to the very bottom where it says combination report, and you'll click on that. And this is the one that you need to print out or save as a PDF because this is what you need to turn in. This will give you everything that you need to do your entire project pretty much. So as long as you're diligent about keeping all of your logs up to date, this is really easy. Because then what you're going to do is you're going to take all these values that you get here and you're going to go into the actual analysis worksheet, and then you'll fill in wherever your intake is, if you've met it, if you're high, if you're low, and your improvement ideas. And that's if you're not within normal limits or within range there. All of this stuff, all these numbers are located right in here. This will give you your DRIs. So this tailors it specifically to you. So everything here, it's literally copy pasted. That's all you're doing. The only thing you need to add in on your own really is the improvement ideas. So this will tell you if you're high or low, really. And there's obviously several different sections. Now, please make sure you're reading a lot of these directions carefully. I can't tell you how many times that I've taken points off because students just don't read the directions. Something like this. So you have to obviously record your fiber. And if you didn't meet the recommended amount of fiber, you need to list 3 foods that you'd be willing to eat that would offer 3 or contain 3 or more grams of fiber per serving. I can't tell you how many times I have seen students put, like for example, if a banana contained 1.5 grams of fiber, saying that you would eat 2 bananas. Well, that's 2 servings. That doesn't count. It needs to be at least 3 grams per 1 serving. So make sure that you are, when you're finding these, that you follow exactly what the guidelines say. And also, if you did not meet the recommended amount, if you do meet the recommended amount, do you have to do this? No, you do not. So don't do extra work for yourself if you don't have to. If you have a great diet, by all means, make sure you flaunt it here because it will make your life that much easier. Now, when we get down to the micronutrients, this will give you all of the information that you have straight from the report. Make sure you list your vitamin name, how much you took in, what the RDA is, what your percentage of the RDA is, and again, all that's going to be located in here. So see, all of that is already, oh, there we go. All that's already located in there. Plus, minus, equal. If you're plus, you're high. If you're minus, you're low. If you're equal, you're within normal limits. If you're low, you are under 70% of the RDA. If you are high, you are above 200% of the RDA. UL is upper limit. So you want to list what the upper limit is for all of these. And you only need to fill in deficiency or toxicity concerns if you are low or high, and only for those individual micronutrients. So for example, if you had vitamin C and you were low on vitamin C, you still want to list the upper limit here, but you want to talk about what the deficiency concerns are for you. If you were taking in 500% of your vitamin C, you would want to list what the potential toxicity concerns are. If there's no known adverse effects, you just write that. That's pretty simple. And then make sure you follow up below where you explain everything. So this is where you put into your own words what it actually means to you. The deficiency or toxicity concerns is like essentially a book definition. And then, again, if you are below 70%, you need to list 5 foods or beverages that would substitute or help increase whatever that vitamin was. So if you're deficient in 2 vitamins, you need to list potentially 10 total things. Now, if you have something like, say you have a fruit smoothie that contains, a ton of both vitamins that you're deficient in, you can use that for the same for both. So you can double dip essentially. Same thing with minerals. All right, and then this last 2 parts here, eating behaviors and SMART goals. Eating behaviors is just what you have personally observed with your diet after you really see all the numbers and everything that you actually consume. So essentially after reading your report, your combination report, what do you notice about your diet and eating habits that's most revealing to you or was the most surprising to you? You need to do at least 3 of these. So I don't know why they have 4, but whatever, that's just the template. So make sure you have at least 3 of these. This is just in your own words here. And then the last thing for you is SMART goals. Are you all familiar with SMART goals? Perfect. You need to list 5 goals to improve your overall health or to maintain good health for you in terms of your diet alone. Now, I've also included in the announcements this SMART goal template. So it gives you just columns and to make sure that you've hit everything with the SMART goals. I've had students in the past that will just fill in the acronym of SMART and call that all 5 goals. So they said the specific aspect was goal 1, the measurable aspect was goal 2, attainable is goal 3, realistic goal 4, and time sensitive is goal 5. That works for one of them, but you need 5 unique SMART goals, okay? And again, remember, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time sensitive. Specific, specific and measurable, you need to attach something that has a quantifiable value. Attainable means that it's possible. Realistic means you can actually do it. So it's attainable for you to lose 10 pounds in a day. Is it realistic for you to do that though? No, not really. And time sensitive just means you have to have a time component to it. So an example of a SMART goal would be, over the next week, I will improve my vitamin C intake by consuming at least 1 whole orange every day. So specific, 1 orange. Measurable, 1 of them every day. Attainable, yes, I can give myself an orange every day. Realistic, yes, it's realistic to eat an orange, a single orange. And time sensitive, 1 week. So there's an example of a SMART goal for you. Any questions on the analysis? This is just for you to use. The only thing you need to turn in is the worksheet. So the worksheet, the combination reports, and then your eating journal. So for the eating journal, this is where you're just going to put the approximate time you ate, what you ate, and for the quantity, you don't have to have anything super specific. Like you don't need to have like, oh, I had 200 grams of chicken today. But you should have, or at least make sure that you put a relative amount. I had a bowl of cereal. Okay, I know what that kind of looks like. Your specific quantity needs to be in the actual Cengage Diet and Wellness Plus. That's where you'll put the actual specific value, okay? Location, where were you? Emotions, how are you feeling when you were eating? And then the circumstances, so, what was going on around you? And the hunger rating. Slightly different label for these than what we've discussed, but still the same thing. So you're either going to put a B or an A for this. So you only put B or A. B is biological, A is appetite. Biological, you would also call physiological, or this is hunger. I'm eating because I'm hungry. Appetite would be psychological. I don't have to eat right now if I really didn't want to, but I want to eat, okay? So appetite, psychological, biological, hunger, or physiological. Make sense? And again, the three things you're turning in, the eating journal, the diet analysis worksheet, and then your combination report here from Cengage. Must have all of those. Yeah. So if you have issues with turning in multiple files to LoudCloud, what you can do is turn in one of them to the assignment and then send me the rest via email or the private forum. Either way is fine. As long as I get those three somehow, preferably all at once, I would appreciate that. Now, here's one thing to keep in mind too. Start date, end date. Make sure your start and end date encompasses all 3 days that you do. So if I recorded all my meals for today and I put my end date as today, I'm only going to see today. Make sure that you have all 3 days that you're putting them in there for. And also, do not record more than 3 days. That's gonna throw you off. Because let's say you put in like one food item in one day, and that was it, that's going to drag down all of your numbers. So even if you're perfect the other 2 days, it's gonna make you look like you're essentially malnourished. So make sure that you are complete with each day you use, only do 3 days, and that's about that. Any questions on that? I know I'm spending a bunch of time on this, but it's just because I want to make sure that you all know exactly what you need to do. There shouldn't be any guesswork here. And yeah, because it is such a big part of your grade. All right, so now that we got that, we are getting started into topic 6 here. So for topic 6, we have water and fluids, and then physical activity, nutrition, and health. I will go over some of the physical activity stuff with you, but that's going to be the stuff that I'm least concerned that you know, because that's more like exercise science, which granted is my field, but this is a nutrition class, so I want you to be much more keen on knowing how your diet affects you rather than the exercise. So let's get into it here. All right, so water is kind of important to us. Our body's mostly made up of water. Water does a whole lot of stuff for us. You know, you think of drinking water to maintain hydration. Well, what exactly does that mean? If you're hydrated, what exactly is going on?
You have enough water in your body for all the chemical reactions that are happening?
Kind of, yeah. Not only that, but you're also having, You also have enough fluid available or water available so that it regulates a lot of your body functions and supports most of your body's structures. Your blood is mostly water. You see that in the form of plasma, but mostly water there. Your cells, inside of your cells, mostly all water. That interstitial space that's in your cells, that's all water pretty much. Your muscles, primarily water. So like if you ever work out and you feel like swole after you work out, that's because your muscles are holding on to extra water to deliver more nutrients to them. So when you feel like your muscles are bigger after doing a strength training session, they actually are. But it's because extra water is being sent in there to provide more nutrients to those muscles. Now, what is the difference here between water and fluids? I mean, I'm sure all of you know what water is, clearly. But what's a fluid? Yeah, fluids are any liquids. Water is always a fluid, but not all fluids are water. And we'll cover more into that here in a couple minutes, but keep that in the back of your mind. Now, there's this thing called the rule of threes, and it says what our basic needs are to survive. So you typically need 3 minutes, or you can survive 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. And even though you have, say a ton of calories stored via your adipose tissue, your body's not going to be able to break those down and use them in a meaningful way if you're not resupplying energy to it. So you can't survive indefinitely off of nothing. You're not going to be able to actually use all of that, all those fat stores for you if you're not still giving yourself some calories to at least sustain normal body function. Now, the water bit, you hear all the time of people going up to, like, say, Camelback Mountain in the middle of the summer and dying. That's a day, not even. That's a couple hours. How does that happen? Heat plays a big role in it. When you go outside in the summer here, what immediately happens to you? You start to sweat. I mean, heck, if you even just look out the door, in July, I feel like I start sweating. Well, every time you sweat, that's obviously a loss of fluids for you. So you pair that with going up a mountain, so you're going higher in altitude, you're going to lose oxygen because you're going to have less oxygen at altitude. Heat, sweat, high altitudes makes for a terrible combination for survival. If you add in other stuff, like, say, any kind of stimulant, like, say, caffeine, so let's say you drink a coffee before you go, now you're speeding up the process because your body's or your metabolic rate is going to go higher. You're going to start sweating more, so it's going to speed up dehydration. When you become dehydrated, you have lost at least 1% of your body weight in fluids. So if you were, say, on a cold day where you see your breath, that's water. That's water vapor. Sweat. You're going to exhale water vapor no matter what the temperature, but you're going to lose all of that just naturally. I mean, all of you are going to sweat during the day no matter what. That's just about your body's natural way to regulate your core temperature. Once you hit 2%, so a loss of 2% of your body weight in fluids, then you become thirsty. So you see the problem there. Once you're thirsty, you are already dehydrated. It's kind of like when you're eating, you know, you can eat over what would make you full, but because your brain kind of operates on a delay, about a 20-minute delay, you could essentially overconsume before you realize you've overconsumed, and then, you know, you end up hating your life. So again, recommendations next Thursday for Thanksgiving. If you want to get the most out of your all-you-can-eat buffet, you got 20 minutes. You better stuff yourself full that first 20 minutes, and that's about it. That's really all the time you're going to have. If you want to do it the right way, slow and steady. The slower you eat, the quicker you will become satiated. But in a holiday associated with overindulgence, what's the fun in that? Once you hit about 5% body weight loss, you start having some big problems. This is when you're going to have, like, say, like major cramping or muscle spasms. You may start experiencing like headaches, dizziness, blurred vision. When you go over that, like if you're getting into like the 8+%, you're comatose pretty much. And it's all because your body can't sustain normal function without proper hydration. So this 3 days without water is under ideal conditions. So like room temperature, no blasting sun on you, that kind of thing. And that's because it's going to allow your body to retain the most amount of fluids it can naturally. So our difference here between fluids and water. Fluids are any liquid. Water is water. Although, if you have, say, like an unsweetened black tea or black coffee, that actually does count as water. The key there, though, is unsweetened, so nothing added to it. If you put any creamer in it, no, it doesn't count anymore. If you're adding sugar in it, no, sorry. The thing to be cautious of is don't treat, for example, coffee as your primary source of water, because coffee also does contain caffeine, and too much caffeine can act as a dehydrator for you. So kind of counterintuitive. But alcohol, that's a fluid. When I am dehydrated, do I care what I'm consuming to try to rehydrate myself? No, okay. What do you all think? Yeah, not really. So something like alcohol definitely is a diuretic. You know, when you drink alcohol, it releases diuretic hormone. It makes you lose more fluids through especially urination. But if I'm dehydrated, and especially like say I'm in a survival situation, so you know I'm on top of Camelback Mountain, all I've got for some reason is a 12-pack of beer in the 120-degree heat, that is going to help keep me hydrated, at least temporarily. So if I'm dehydrated, it doesn't matter what I consume. I just need fluids. I need fluids quickly. If we're looking for long term, now it does matter. Because again, something like alcohol is a diuretic. Something like coffee or caffeine containing things will become a diuretic for you. So an immediate need, drink anything. Long term, skew more towards the actual water. Now I got here that you should have your fluid intake be about 80% beverages. Where do we get the rest of our fluids?
Like fruits and vegetables that are high in water content.
That's definitely one of the places. How would you generalize that statement though? Food, yeah. Solid foods. Unless they are specifically dehydrated, they contain water. So pretty much unless you got like rice cakes or some sort of powder, there's water in it. You know, you take something like bread. Have any of you ever left bread in the cupboard too long? And what happens to it?
It's stale and moldy.
Moldy. Mold only grows in the presence of water. Mold likes dark, damp conditions. So your bread contains water. I mean, it's not like you can wring out like it's a sponge, but it still does contain water. So around about 20% of your fluid intake every day comes from the food you eat. Now, yes, if you do consume foods that are more heavily composed of water, you know, such as stuff like, you know, your celery, many of your fruits, yeah, that stuff is going to contribute more, but you still want to be drinking most of your liquids. Now, this is a little note here for you all, how we measure fluids in terms of fluid ounces. Fluid ounces are a measure of volume. They're not a measure of mass. So if I take this Diet Dr. Pepper, it's 20 fluid ounces. Well, what happens if I filled this up with mercury? Yeah, it'd be much heavier because mercury, while it is a liquid, is very dense. So it will be considerably heavier than what Diet Dr. Pepper is, which is mostly water and some little additives. So fluid ounces are just a volume measure, not a mass measure or not a weight measure. When you talk about a cup, you have 8 fluid ounces. Remember when we talked about the function of the kidneys, how the kidneys are filtering out really all the waste products from your blood? Do you think the kidneys are going to work better or worse depending on your fluid balance? So if you had normal hydration compared to being dehydrated, your kidneys are going to function a lot more efficiently. How easy is it to eat a whole meal without drinking anything? What happens?
You get thirsty. Like while you're eating.
Okay. Think about, you know, if you're ever swallowing a whole bunch of stuff without having any extra fluid there, aside from, you know, saliva, to help get that down through your esophagus, it feels kind of uncomfortable at times to have solid foods that you can kind of feel need to get washed down. So it's a lot easier when you have water or other fluids, some sort of drink to help speed up really the process, makes it a lot easier on you to do. Same thing with the kidneys. The more fluids you have, the easier the kidney's job is to filter stuff out. if you're dehydrated, your kidneys have to work harder, so it's going to put more strain on them. So if you had kidney disease, on top of not wanting to have a high protein diet, you also need to make sure you stay well hydrated, because that's going to help your kidneys to function much easier. All right, so I want you to try this real quick, but real quick, look up one of your favorite drinks that isn't water and tell me what's all in there. Okay. What did you say that was? Raspberry what? Raspberry sweet tea?
Oh, yeah.
Or iced tea?
Yeah.
Okay. What'd you all find?
I did lemonade,
Okay.
and it said for calories 99, total fat 0.1 grams, saturated fat 0 grams, polyunsaturated fat 0 grams, monounsaturated fat 0 grams, cholesterol 0 milligrams, sodium 10 milligrams, potassium 37 milligrams, total carbohydrates 26 grams, and proteins 0.2 grams.
All right. How about you two?
I did Arizona peach tea. Calories 90, total fat 0 grams, saturated fat 0, trans fat 0, cholesterol 0, sodium 10 grams, total carbohydrates 24, sugar 24 grams, protein 0.
I kind of did the same thing, like Arizona iced tea, just the green tea. 130 calories per 16-ounce serving. No fat, no sodium, 35 carbs, 34 grams added sugar, 120% day value vitamin C.
Well, that's good. Silver lining there. What were your serving sizes?
Oh, mine was 8 fluid ounces.
8? 8? I'm guessing that'll be like 8 or 16 probably.
What was the little can?
Probably 8 then.
Yeah, okay, so.
All right, so what do you notice about all of those drinks? They all shared the same traits virtually, aside from the fact that 3 of you picked tea of some sort. How much fat was in all of them? None. How much protein was in them? None, really. Unless you're going out of your way to find drinks that contain fats or proteins, you don't see a whole heck of a lot of those. Primarily, all your drinks are sugar water. I mean, that's really all they are. Now you look at something like, say, milk. Okay, milk does contain fat. It does contain protein. But where do you get milk from? Potentially, yeah. For something to be milk, it has to have been lactated. Only living things lactate. So whenever you see like your soy milk, your almond milk, that is a complete lie. Because show me an animal that gives me soy milk. It's soy juice is what it is. It's almond juice. But that probably wouldn't sell nearly as well. But anyway, if it's living, that's where you're going to find fats and proteins. If it comes from a synthetic source, so pretty much anything in a bottle, primarily you are going to see water and carbs. Now, yes, if you were to get, like, say, a protein shake or something like that, obviously, that's gonna be a little different. But those are also, specialty drinks. But for the most part, all your drinks are water and carbs. That's really it. Usually not a whole heck of a lot of cholesterol, usually not much sodium. I mean, how many of you want to drink a salty drink? I mean, not really, yeah. So you have a little bit in there. Sodium helps to stabilize it, so it actually can act as a preservative. Before refrigeration, meats especially would be cured in salt. So you would take, like, whatever, a steak essentially, and you would really just completely coat the whole thing in salt. Well, salt is very good at preventing bacterial growth. You look at, like, say, the salt flats in, was it Utah? How much vegetation's there? Like none, because salt doesn't like things, or doesn't allow things to live in it too much. The Dead Sea, for example, how much life is in there? Not a terribly heck of a lot, because it has such a high salt content in the water. So salt does really well at getting rid of or preventing pathogens from growing. So that's why you would have that in there as kind of a preservative, but still not a heck of a lot. So your overall benefits here, all these are going to be obviously good sources of fluids. The kind of downside here is the sugar content, especially the added sugar content. When you talk about carbs in a bad way, the bad carbs, and I say that with quotes, really are your added sugars and your corn syrups. The added sugars are just empty calories. Corn syrup is going to act as an obesogen. Remember, it's going to turn into fat at roughly a 20% faster rate than cane sugar will. So even if I had a whole bunch of added sugars in a drink, like Sprite is one of the biggest, perpetrators of this. If you ever look at a bottle of Sprite, they are just loaded with added sugars. But if I had a choice between added cane sugar versus corn syrup, the cane sugar is going to be theoretically better for you. It's kind of like vaping's a little better for you than smoking cigarettes. Both of them aren't great, but if you're going to pick the lesser of two evils. All right, so we talked about the difference between fluids and water. Men need more water than women each day. And they also need more fluids. Why do you think that is? Yeah, and what does that mean? So the more muscle mass you have, the more water demands you have, or more fluid demands you have, because your muscles are where much of your fluid is going to exist. What happens if you try to mix oil and water together? They don't mix, right? So what does it say about our adipose tissue and fluids? They don't mix. Fats are hydrophobic. They repel water. So all the fat you have really doesn't have much fluid in there. I mean, yeah, there's still some, but compared to muscle, not even close. Women are going to carry more body fat than men. Because women have more body fat, they have a lower need for fluids than men. It's just all about body composition. Now, these are general numbers. So if you were a male that had low body fat percentage and high muscle mass, or a female that had lower body fat, higher muscle mass, these numbers would shift. Typically the more, or well, I should say the less body fat you have, typically the more fluids you need. Now, I'm sure you've all heard about like the 8-ounce glasses of water a day recommendation. And that's a pretty decent rule of thumb. Around about like 3 liters-ish of water a day. But again, what happens if you go hiking on Camelback Mountain?
You're gonna need more water because you're gonna be losing more fluids.
Yeah. Or what happens if you're staying in bed all day? Probably need less, right? So a better way to describe how much water or fluids you need is to look at your urine output. Everyone that urinates first thing in the morning, it's going to be darker, stronger smell because there's a lot more concentrated waste products in there. You've theoretically had all night to filter those out, depending that you've slept through the night. So that's your benchmark. To tell that you've had enough fluids is you want to make sure that your urine is clear and copious. So each time you urinate, it should get lighter and lighter throughout the day. If it's still like afternoon into early evening and you're infrequently going to the bathroom and when you do it's still dark or colored, that's a sign you haven't had enough fluids during the course of the day. So you should be urinating round about every 1 to 2 hours. And pretty much by about the 3rd, 4th time, you should have a relatively clear stream going through you there. Now it is important to note that you don't want to go way over the top. So drinking gallons and gallons of water a day is not good for you. You can get water intoxication. Another thing that many people don't think of is a concept called exercise-induced hyponatremia. This is a phenomenon that happens where you actually get water intoxication, but through your own doing. And it's not by it's not really by consuming too much water. It's by losing too much salt. So for example, if you're running a marathon, you're obviously sweating. Well, what's in sweat?
So,
Water and electrolytes. So salt water, pretty much. Depending on if you're a salty sweater or not, will depend on the concentration of the salts that are in there. Well, if I keep drinking water throughout the race, that's good. I'm replacing the water lost, but am I replacing my electrolytes? No. So you see how that can create a very dangerous imbalance. If I don't hold on to my electrolytes, I can put that water balance or the concentration level of my electrolytes way out of alignment. That can cause my cells to swell up, potentially burst. It can lead to things that aren't so great. Something as relatively benign as GI distress or GI upset, something as severe as permanent blindness and death. So if you are performing any kind of long duration physical activity or exercise, and long duration is 2 hours or more, you need to be replacing ideally some of your carbs, but your electrolytes along with water. If you're exercising up to 2 hours, water alone's fine. Pretty much there's no need for anything else because your body's going to be able to do everything it needs to do in that short of a time. If you go beyond 2 hours, after hour 1, you want to start replacing your electrolytes. So if I'm running a marathon, you think a marathon takes what? 4, 5, 6 hours, something like that? After the first hour, I want to make sure that I'm starting to consume salt with my water or some kind of electrolyte with my water. This is where like sports drinks are beneficial. We'll talk about that at the end here. All right, we talked about this already. All right, now, what do you think is going to be absorbed better by our bodies? Hot or cold? All right, we have 1 vote for hot. Hot? You're nodding yes. Is that an agreement? All of you say hot. Wow. So when the summer comes around and you all are outside doing whatever, and you come back inside after some sort of vigorous physical activity, I'm going to make sure to make you a nice hot cup of coffee and have you drink that and see how well you do with it. The real answer is it depends. And it all depends on what your environmental factors are. Because on a hot day, do you want to have a hot drink? No, you really don't. On a cold day, do you want to have a cold drink? Not particularly, right? Your body will do better absorbing to help keep core temperature homeostasis. So the colder you are, hot drinks will be absorbed better and quicker, and vice versa. The hotter you are, cold drinks will be absorbed better. The fluids you intake are going to directly impact thermoregulation. You wouldn't ever give somebody who is, or who has a very high fever, or like say heat stroke or heat illness, you would never give them hot beverages. That's going to be counterintuitive to what your body needs. So hot environments, cold drinks. Cold environments, hot drinks. All right, what we should limit. Now, it doesn't happen to me because I only drink diet drinks. But for the majority of Americans, you get about 1/5 of your calories from beverages. That's kind of a lot if you really think about it. If we take a 2,000 calorie diet, that's 400 calories a day. That's pretty much a whole meal you get just from drinks. One of the things we talked about when we talked about proteins was that proteins are going to help satiate you. They're going to stay in your stomach longer. They're going to denature and expand. So they're going to keep you fuller longer. The caveat to that is that that only really works when you have solid proteins. So liquid proteins get treated essentially like liquids or like just regular fluids. They'll go through your stomach a lot quicker. They don't really have that satiating effect nearly as much. So when you're consuming calorie-containing drinks, it's really not doing you a whole lot of benefit for really anything. Now, if you were consuming, say, any of the drinks you all mentioned as a part of rehydrating during, like, say, a marathon, that could actually be really beneficial because you're getting some electrolytes, you're getting fluids, and you're also getting carbs, which are going to help replenish what you're using for the actual energy itself. So that's pretty beneficial because the faster I can get that out of my stomach and into my intestines to absorb, the faster I can use it. That's really good. That's not so good if, say, I'm trying to limit my calorie intake or I'm trying to improve my satiation levels. Now, this isn't to say that any drinks that contain calories are the devil or anything like that, but it is to show you that you need to be cognizant about what you're consuming, especially what you're drinking. Now, pop, generally associated with weight gain and obesity, unfortunately. We've talked about the difference between having full calorie drinks and diet drinks. Typically what happens when you have a diet drink is that your body thinks it's getting calories and it's not, so it gets upset at you because it prepares itself for calories. When it doesn't get those calories, it turns on things like, say, your hunger hormones, so ghrelin and leptin, to make you eat or make you want to be hungry. It doesn't really happen if you consume a diet drink with food because you have the food to counteract that. But if you were just drinking diet drinks on your own, then yeah, that's potentially problematic. This here, you want to limit those artificially sweetened beverages to 32 fluid ounces or less a day. And this is all why. It's all about this whole causing you to have a preference for sugary foods. So the sugar addiction is real. That's why added sugars are potentially so dangerous, because they will cause your not only taste preferences, but your physiological preference to shift towards more simple sugars or something sweeter. And again, those added sugars are virtually empty calories. Unless you're doing some sort of exercise or, physical activity along with it, it's not really giving you a whole lot of benefit. Alcohol, I mean, intuitively everyone knows you shouldn't be drinking alcohol if you want to be like perfectly healthy. I would be telling you, complete lies if I said I've never drank alcohol. Heck, I got my fuel alcohol producer's license here, so I'm actually allowed to make 10,000 proof gallons of ethanol every year out of my at-home pot still. Only problem is that I have to mix in a gallon of gasoline with every 10 gallons of it to make it so it's not consumable. Yeah, I am a somewhat legal moonshiner. Remember, there's no nutritional value in alcohol. How does our body use alcohol?
It doesn't use it for anything.
Well, what happens when you drink? So if you take a shot of tequila right now,
It's metabolized in your liver.
Yeah. Yeah, it gets absorbed, and actually, side note here, alcohol gets absorbed at a considerably faster rate than any other fluids you have. So if you have, like, say, supplements that are, or medications that really need to get past your stomach acid, shot of tequila, mix them with those pills, good to go. Probably not the best advice. I think you would call that a shitty life pro tip. But yes, alcohol will pass through the stomach at a much, much faster rate than all other liquids. But like you just said, you absorb it similarly to what you would do with all other nutrients. except you can't break it down. You have to send it to the liver to metabolize it. And when it gets metabolized, remember, it turns straight into triglycerides. You can't even take those triglycerides and use them for acetyl-CoA immediately. You have to store them first. There has to be a couple of reactions that happen to them before you can actually break them down. So every fat or every calorie you consume from alcohol goes straight into storage fat. That ain't no fun. When I was, when I was health coaching, anytime I worked with people in weight management, the number one thing that most everyone can eliminate to improve every single aspect of their life is alcohol. If you just get rid of alcohol, the world becomes better for you. Now, the only problem is that, many people, myself included, like that feeling of what happens when you drink. I really shouldn't say that on a sober campus because none of you do that. So that becomes that little problematic piece there. But really, there's no benefit to alcohol at all. Like, it's only a bad thing. Then again, people do harder drugs. So at least I'm not doing heroin, right? Why would you want to limit your low fat or skim milk? I mean, first off, how many of you are actually drinking milk every day? I kind of view that as like a kid's thing, almost. I'm an adult, so I don't need to drink that anymore. It's kind of for the same reason that you want to limit like pop. It's because mostly of added sugars. Fat flavors foods. Fat also flavors drinks. So if you have whole milk, that's 3% milk, so 3% fat, you're gonna have slightly more calories per serving than any of the others. But you're not gonna have nearly as many added sugars. Fats are beneficial for you, especially when you can consume unsaturated fats. Those help with things like transporting our fat-soluble vitamins. They help with things like, say, building up our cell membranes. They're going to do things like, say, usually make your skin healthier by allowing your natural oils to be produced, things like that. The lower fat milk products you drink tend to have added sugars in them. So to maintain a milk taste without fat means you have to sweeten it. So that's something to kind of watch out for with that. Caffeine, you don't want to have any more than 400 milligrams a day. Over 500 milligrams will dehydrate you. This is strictly from a fluid balance perspective. The more research that's done on caffeine, the more that we're finding out that it's actually not good for you in almost any sense of the word. It causes sleep dysregulation. It can cause abnormal heart rhythms. You can actually withdraw from caffeine, so you can form a chemical dependence on it. We know that it actually doesn't help athletes much at all. So there's not a whole lot of benefits to caffeine, really, which is kind of unfortunate. It will help give you a little bit of a pep in your step, at least initially. If you're going to consume caffeine, you want to do that mostly in the beginning of your day. After around 12, 1, 2 o'clock, caffeine will actually start interfering with your sleep-wake cycle. Now, on an interesting note, if you want to nap during the day, it's a very good idea to drink some caffeine right before you try to take a nap. And why do you think that would be? Why would you want to take a stimulant right before you're trying to go to sleep?
Maybe so that by the time it gets metabolized by your body, you wake up, so it's a shorter nap.
Yeah. The longer you nap, the worse it is for you. Power naps, like your 20-minute naps, 20, 30-minute naps, really, really good for you. Only problem is that if you go and take that nap and you wake up, you kind of do feel a little bit groggy and it takes you a while to get to your overall arousal level. Just like you said, if I'm consuming caffeine, now this means like say a cup of coffee, not a pot of coffee kind of thing. That's gonna help me become aroused quicker. The stimulant's also going to help wake you up so you don't oversleep there. So that's actually a good thing for you to try if you're going to be doing like a power nap during the course of the day. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind there. You're welcome. All right, and here's where all our fluids actually go. Urine output is obviously the most that we have. Your bladder, an average adult bladder, can hold around about 400 to 500 cc's of fluid. So a cc is a cubic centimeter, that's equal to a milliliter. Once your bladder is about half filled, you start feeling the need to urinate. So your body starts sending signals for you to urinate really early on. It'd kind of be like if your low gas light came on when you still had half a tank. So it gives you a very early warning. If you try to hold in your urine too long, so if you try to hold well past what you can actually damage, like potentially like perforate your bladder. So you definitely don't want to do that. Now, this isn't to like try to scare you into saying like, oh, if the moment I feel like I need to go to the bathroom, I need to run to it kind of thing. But like if you were, say, holding it in for like hours at a time, I don't know how people can do it, but I guess they do. That's not a good thing. Once fluids get into your bladder, they're gone. You cannot reuse them. So with your kidneys, you have two routes. After the kidneys filter out or filter your blood, the remaining fluids go one of two ways. They either go back into your bloodstream or they go into your bladder. Once it opens this door, once it passes this mark, there is no turning back. As soon as fluids go into your bladder, they are on a one-way ticket out. No way to get them back. So even though, let's say, for example, you may have 500 cc's of urine in your bladder, that's not usable. It's like it's not in you at all. Kind of like your weight. You contain, between like your gut biome and the feces that's in your GI tract, you contain around about 15 to 20 pounds of stuff that's just in your tubes. So next time you're on the scale and you're feeling bad about your weight, just remember, minus about 15 pounds from that, because that's what your real weight is. Feces will change quite drastically depending on depending on the consistency of your bowel movements. I think that kind of goes without saying. Sweat as well is going to change quite a bit depending on what your physical activity or environmental impact is. And then this insensible loss via skin and lungs. I remember having a professor when I was an undergrad try to tell me that your skin is waterproof. And I said, clearly you have never sweated once in your life. But yeah, your skin is not waterproof at all. It's very permeable. I mean, why do you think you see cops OD on fentanyl all the time anytime they have a fentanyl bust? It's because if you touch that on your skin, it absorbs in your skin. Our skin is very permeable, you know? So you lose a lot of fluids just from what evaporates out of you. That is going to change. So this is going to get much bigger in cold environments. When you're in a cold environment, do you ever say it's like really like humid out? No, I mean, cold is almost synonymous with dry. So cold air will make water vapor escape from your lungs at a much faster rate. That's why, like, if you're, say, breathing in cold air, you can feel like, it feels almost like painful breaths in like the back of your throat kind of thing. And just because you're losing so much moisture that it's drying out the back of your throat, makes it kind of like dry and uncomfortable kind of thing. If you have asthma, you don't want to be exercising in the cold unless you're wearing a face covering. And specifically, you want to be wearing, like, say, a not a mask, what are those called? Like something cloth, whatever. The neck things, you know what I'm talking about? What's that called? A what? So like if you have like something that you would like put over your face, kind of, huh? It's like that, but it's not. It's much bigger because it would actually come up over your face. Forget what that is. But anyways, the cloth in that, or the material in that, will hold in or trap moisture in. So I guess not too much unlike what a mask would do. It's just a little easier to ventilate through those. So that's probably what, I mean, that's one of the things you'd want to do if you had asthma and you wanted to exercise outside in the cold. All right, so we talked about dehydration already and all this good bit here. And then here's everything that is going to happen depending on if you are hydrated or not. Let's even look at just the differences between the hydrated and moderate dehydration. Your pulse. Why would your pulse be more rapid when you're dehydrated?
Your blood be thicker if you have less water, so your heart has to push more out?
Yeah, if you are dehydrated, you're going to have less overall blood volume. It is going to be thicker. So if you, like, say, were dehydrated and then you got on a plane, it would potentially be a very uncomfortable flight for you because you could really, you know, experience things like shortness of breath or potentially like chest pains because of that. You actually do run the risk of having, or a higher risk of, like, say, blood clots too. But when it is less volume, you need to pump faster to make sure that all circulates to continue delivering nutrients to your body. If you quit circulating your blood, you just die. But you still need all of your organs, all of your muscles to still get all of their oxygen and vital nutrients to sustain them. So your pulse goes like this. With moderate dehydration, it gets high. With severe dehydration, it gets low, because eventually your heart's going to kind of give out. I mean, obviously, urine flow, yeah, that makes sense. Have any of you ever used this as a way to tell if you're dehydrated or not? Skin elasticity. So typically, if you take, like, say, the back of your hand, like around your wrist, and you pinch the skin here, this should go straight back. So try it real quick. Pull up some skin, let it go, and it should return real quick. You're all pretty well hydrated. If you were dehydrated, this would actually stick up, and when you let go, it would still be up for a bit. So I mean, it's not going to be like Play-Doh where you can mold it or whatever, but you'll see that it has a noticeable lag in returning back to its normal place. And that's because there's no fluids or reduced amount of fluids to keep that elasticity. So if we do use the Play-Doh example, regular Play-Doh or clay is very malleable. There's fluids in it, right? Well, what happens when that dries out? What happens if you heat up a ceramic pot or a clay pot? It gets hard. That's exactly what's happening in your skin there. Obviously to a much lesser extent, but that's the same thing that's pretty much happening there. This is one of the easiest ways to tell if you are dehydrated or not, is that skin elasticity test, because anyone can do it. Now, one other thing too to notice is hands and feet. When you get especially into the severe dehydration, why would those get, like, say, cold and clammy? Like, why would you have moisture on your hands and feet if you're severely dehydrated? I mean, it seems counterintuitive. This happens kind of for the same reason of how your body reacts to hypothermia. When you get cold, you shiver, right? Shivering, getting goose pimples, all of that is to help stimulate muscle contraction or friction to make heat. Whenever you have friction, you have heat. You rub your hands together, they get hot. Friction makes heat. When you get severely hypothermic, your body quits shivering because it's past the point where it can fix itself. Unless you go and you put yourself in a warmer environment, your body is not going to be able to regulate anymore. It can no longer heat you back up. Same thing's happening here. Your body is going to hold on to moisture as long as it can. Once you reach that critical endpoint, it just kind of gives up. So that's really where you're in a boatload of problems there. Now, if you're severely dehydrated and experiencing that, you're most likely not in a sound state of mind if you're awake at all. So You wouldn't yourself probably be able to identify that, but that is what would happen. Great. All these different benefits. We've kind of talked about this already. Didn't mention so much about the whole lubricating joints, but yeah, it'll do that. So it helps for your body to kind of replenish synovial fluid. All right, and then we talked about our sports drinks here. So remember, you want to have some sort of electrolyte-based drink after an hour if you're going to be exercising for more than 2 hours. And last thing here, when you are intaking any kind of fluids during exercise, your body is going to still absorb fluids at a rate that's similar to what it would do when you were at rest. If you're consuming even, let's say, like a higher fat, higher protein based drink, while it'll still go quicker through your stomach, it's going to hang around a lot longer than just say basic water would, or even water mixed with carbs. This is why, especially when you're using sports drinks as you should, that having these carbs in there, especially like your simple sugars, are beneficial because they're going to get absorbed quickly and allow your body to use them much quicker. So this is a time where, you know, added sugars are good because you are going to readily use them. You need to replenish the carbs I've already been using. Now, when you actually do this, a full calorie sports drink can usually be diluted by about half. So if you had a 20-ounce full calorie sports drink, you could take out half of that, fill this with water, and it really wouldn't lose too much of the taste. The lighter amount of carbs in there will speed up that absorption process further. So you want to have roughly a 6 to 8% or less concentration of carbs in your drink. That's not something I'm going to expect you to remember, but it's just kind of more of an FYI. All right, so that's everything I wanted to cover with fluids today. What kind of questions do you all have here?
So when you get water intoxication and you say that like your cells can burst, is it talking about like your blood cells?
Yeah,
So
that is one of them.
So like what would happen specifically? Like how would you like be able to detect that? Since
At that point, you wouldn't, because you would be unconscious.
I'm just curious.
Water intoxication is it's a misnomer because you think intoxication as being something like euphoric. It's more along the lines of overdosing. So if you were to drink, like, say, 5 gallons of water right now, I mean, that'd be pretty difficult to do, but that would really start flushing out your system a whole lot. That's not too terribly problematic. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it. But let's say you drink like 10 or 20 gallons of water, and again, this is in a shorter time frame. Water doesn't get held in the stomach all that long, especially if you're not consuming any other foods with it or anything else. So you'll keep absorbing that and absorbing it and absorbing it, and it's going to dilute your cells to the point where they do swell up and then potentially burst. When that happens to red blood cells, you would essentially become hypoxic. So your oxygen saturation levels would steadily drop because you no longer have the cells to transport the oxygen. Well, once you hit those critical levels of saturation, you're going to pass out, essentially. So this is why, like with all things, you know, moderation and balance are key. I mean, I know that's the term I use for virtually everything, but I mean, it's true. While it takes a lot of water to get you to that critical point, especially if you're not exercising, it's still something that's very realistic to happen if you really overdid it. All right, well, that is everything new I had for you there. So thank you all for getting through that with me. And then if you don't have any more questions, you are all good to go. And I will see you all back here. Well, actually, I won't see you back here until after the break. But again, I will have a Zoom session on Tuesday for you to attend. And then we'll be meeting back here then in 2 weeks.